Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday. We are DebateSensei. I'm Jared Kabika Miller, your debate coach, professor of communications. We got Matt Shapiro, Esquire.
Hello.
Tim Seavey, Visolutions, San Diego. Nice. And I got a surprise. I didn't tell anybody, but I set up a Twitch stream. So we're trying that out right now, see how that works. Okay. Mm-hmm. So maybe that'll happen. All right. Yeah.
Hello, Twitchers.
Twitch. Yeah, I don't know if that was an insult or not. But regardless, and a lot of people, playing games on there, and like, well, debate's kind of like a game. We kind of treat it like a game a little bit.
It's most definitely a game.
Definitely a game. I would love to do some sort of like live, like real-time feedback of debates or recordings of debates or something like
Commentary.
that. Yeah. Like if anyone's interested in doing that, I would totally be down to
absolutely.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like real time, just like feedback, reaction video type stuff. And so, yeah, we'll definitely do that. But anyways, we're expanding our reach as far as what we're going for. Today, we're going to be talking about how to lose debates, which, I mean, everyone can probably think about it. It's like, dude, that seems like the easiest thing in the world to do.
That's my specialty.
Yeah. We got a panel of experts on this one.
Yeah.
I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this.
Man. Oh, man. You always remember the losses way more than the wins, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Typically.
Yeah. I could have said this or that. But anyways, this is more about like what to do when you lose. That's like how to handle loss in debate. Like when you put yourself out there and the judge says nope, voting against you, or the panel of judges, even worse. Oh man, a panel of judges votes, unanimously against
3-0 against you.
Oh my god. I got worse than that though. Oh man. So final round of NPTE, that's the National Parliamentary Tournament of Excellence. This is the qualifier for debates, and I get into the final round. I forget the split, but it was like, so you debate in front of an entire audience of people, and every single one of them gets a ballot.
Unanimous.
Yeah, it was like 70 people, I think, or 80 people in the audience, and I lost like 7-1 or something, like a margin like that. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's rough. Oh, you remember your losses. I don't remember the debate. I remember the vote. It was really, really lopsided. Oh man,
it's true. I mean, you put yourself out there. You said that. I mean, one way. One thing I think that kind of really comes into understanding how you should feel after you lose is you should reflect on what you did to prepare for that debate. Right.
Yeah.
I think anyone who is under the misconception that you just walk into a room one day and win 5 debates in a row is like, doesn't really have the shouldn't feel too bad if they lose, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like the ones that hurt the most are the ones that you just pour your heart and soul into, and you're like ditching other classes to work on your debates, your arguments. You should not ditch your classes. But my point is just like, and then you lose. Right. Yeah. Or it doesn't resonate like you thought it would, those situations are the ones where emotionally, at least you, in my mind, are justified in being crushed. Right. Like you shouldn't feel crushed just because you thought you're naturally going to just walk into this activity and dominate.
Yeah. So I think like the different ways that you could think about it is how do you deal with yourself? Yeah. How do you deal with the judge, and how do you deal with your coach? So right now we're talking about ourselves, like
teammates too, but
teammates, right? Okay, that's cool.
For partner debates, like that's a pretty important one too. But on the subject of how to lose debates, I think your very first, easiest, best.
Blame
path
your partner
to losing-
100%. That's what you do first and foremost. Every expert debater knows you blame your partner in your partner debate. You know what I mean? You're like, hey,
Shove them.
you know
right
whose
in-
fault this is? This is your fault.
Oh,
This is my
yeah.
coach Jared's fault.
It's
Definitely
I
not
think
my fault.
It's an effective strategy to lose debates, not the round that you're immediately in, but if you just lost a round, what's affectionately called the 1JR, the first judge rebuttal, is the debaters that argue back against a decision. That's a guaranteed way to lose future rounds because you will see your judges again. Like, even if you feel like it's probably not likely and you'll never see this person again, do not argue with the judge over their opinion. That is the most base level, just even common sense knowledge. And yet so many debaters still miss that. So do not argue with your judge. Whatever your judge says, the moment that decision, that disclosure happens or the round is over, whatever feedback they say, the second they open their mouth, for the love of God, your flowing needs to become impeccable because that is the most important, the viable information you will get out of that round.
Just to make it clear, what Tim's saying is take your flow sheet, flip it upside down, and write down what the judge said.
Seriously,
I mean, like you're not supposed to stop.
That feedback that you get back from your judge is the most important. Because they may not get it all down on their ballot. They may not have the recall later
memory.
To get it in there. The second that debate is over and they're not giving you feedback, that is the most important time to be a phenomenal listener. And you have nothing else to say. It is thank you, judge.
And people get really emotionally charged. Tim, you're right. First of all, you're probably super emotional. So you should write the stuff down that the judge says because you're not going to remember. You're sad.
Totally.
You just lost.
Yeah, you're in a whole
maybe
other
you don't know, but just know that I think there's this part where everyone they may think, a lot of times I've said this to myself. Let's put it this way. The judge didn't know that that's what I was trying to do. And so they are wrong in saying what they said. All right. You're allowed to say that once. Let's say you go to a room and a judge is like, well, I really didn't like how you did this. And you're like, well, they don't understand. That's what I was trying to do. The second you go into a second round and the judge says the same things to you, a different judge is like, well, I didn't like the exact same thing the first judge said. You need to start hearing these things. You know what I mean? There's this part where it's what you thought you were trying to do, what you thought would be this brilliant strategy. Well, maybe it's not resonating with one judge or all the judges. And some level, at some point, when you start hearing the same things, the same feedback over and over, you really need to look in the real mirror and you need to kind of be like, I'm making a mistake. I'm not doing something that more than one person now is telling me they want to see me change.
I had a friend one time, he's still my friend, Brandon Wordy. He told me that you always lose one. Okay, so this is based off of a 6 preliminary round tournament. So that's really common, or at least it used to be. Really
conventional tournament back in the day.
You have 6 preliminary rounds, and if you won a majority of those, then it was pretty much guaranteed that you were moving on. So he would say, you lose 1 to the judge and 1 to the topic. And so if you're losing more than that, then that's when you got to start thinking about, what am I doing? What do I need to switch up? Things like that. And so, but saying that you had 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 6 topics that you lost to, it's I don't know.
In a competition like Parley, obviously, where the topic is changing 6 times in a competition, that may even work in different types of debate where it's maybe the neg is way weaker or your neg is way weaker on, in an LD. And so you can give 1 to the topic. I think it's still kind of true.
And being aware of those ratios, I think, is really helpful. Okay. That really, really good debaters, I would say, win 75% of their rounds. I'm talking the best debaters out there. Okay. Yeah. I would think that moderately good debaters might be winning 60% of their times. They're regularly breaking. Maybe they're losing in the first or second out round or something like that. Maybe they make a run every once in a while, but that's typically the ratio, right? That's a small from 60% to 75% is a really small area, but it's like,
well, it's small numerically, I guess, is
Yeah.
what you're trying to say, but that's
Right.
As the bell curve
vast.
goes, yeah,
that's miles apart when you're talking about people who can just consistently go into
Right.
open rounds and win.
but if you're at 51%, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you got something going on. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
you have to really think about debate in a much longer term. That's why you want to go to more tournaments.
Yeah.
You could get more data. To work.
And that data, I mean, that's kind of, I'm having a hard time kind of getting at what I'm trying to say. But the key is like so many of us have this idea in our heads of what we want to do with our debate and how we want to be ourselves. We want to be the person we think is the winning debater, and we want the judges to accept that as the winning debater. Now, when you go into round after round and you're getting the same feedback as to like you lost. First of all, here's the thing: you lost. One of the reasons I didn't like it was, you're going too fast, you're going too slow, whatever it may be. I need you to be more organized. Some people are like, I don't like saying sub point A, sub point B. A lot of novice people, for instance, they're like, I don't like that. I want to just do it my way because my way is, it to me seems more right. Like that. Maybe you win some rounds. Maybe you win every round ever. And then if that's the case, keep doing what you're doing. But if you're not, and judges are consistently telling you like, I need more organization, like you're going to have to take criticism and then implement it into applying it to how you will do it next time. And so you're going to have to admit you were wrong. You know what I mean? I was wrong.
Great way to lose a debate. Number 2, besides to argue with the judge, number 2 is don't change your ways. Right? Like your judges know what they're talking about. Your coaches know what they're talking about. Even like your peers, when you're getting feedback, especially when you're new, like coaches don't tell you to do something because they feel like it. They're telling you to get you better. So just trusting and believing your coaches, even if it feels weird at first, that's why coaches are there. So listening to your coaches, honestly, and taking that feedback that you're getting from judges. Matt, I know you're talking about a lot of times if you have maybe a unique case, you're trying something that's a little bit different in your own unique style.
It can go to substance too.
Especially like, sure, you maybe get one-off judges here and there that just didn't jive with it. Like Jared says, you maybe lose one to the judge, but really listen to those consistent trends. I know that I heard a really common piece of wisdom was that it takes 12 rounds to realize what the hell you're doing. So if you're new to debate, like the way to lose debate is just go do it. Like you're probably
don't practice is what you're saying, right?
Okay. Yeah. Like after a good chunk of rounds, so sometimes that's 2 tournaments of that will get you 12 prelims. You'll have an idea of what's going on. But the first few, if you're totally lost and confused, that is 100% okay. Like and do not be freaked out by not knowing everything that's happening. So just continue rolling with it.
Even I mean that can be applied in a more specific sense to where even people who are expert debaters or not experts, I guess no one's really a master debater, but we all trying to be, right? People who with a lot of experience, maybe like all of a sudden they start working on a case. They're like, oh, I have this idea for a plan, and they come up with this plan and they come up with these disadvantages, and like they spend all their time preparing their arguments, but they never spent any time practicing with another debater who's maybe like their equivalent or hopefully better to kind of see how that feels in a round before you go to the tournament. You know what I mean? Like the thought that you've thought of every little thing is simply not true. And the best way to test your theory is in practice. I think what Jared and Tim has said, like 12 debates and you're ready to go at least for a round. Part of it is just getting used to your brain coming to being forced to react to the questions to your arguments.
So there is an exception to everything that you're saying, though, and that exception is like what happens when you hear like 2 different judges saying things that seem at odds with each other, or your judge and your coach, right?
Sure.
That becomes a negotiation. Yeah, I mean, you really have to think about how, and that's why I really want you to pay attention to ratios, right? As a debater, it's like you can't win every time because the nature of this game is that you're being evaluated by a human and they have opinions and they might just be having a bad day and normally you would win, but that day you didn't, right? It's like you have to accept a little bit of the chaos that is debate in order to kind of maintain your sanity, right? It's a long game. It's over a long period of time. You want to get more and more and more rounds in, and that's how you do it. But if you start hearing these like contrasting opinions, that's when you start really realizing it's like, oh, maybe that's their opinion, about it.
Hey, and this
who am I as a debater?
Part of, people may be thinking now, well, how do you deal with this? One thing you do is the judge, and like if you're in this judge's room that you have to, try to avoid X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? What does it say? That's why you keep the format.
Right. So, I think what Cecilia is talking about is that the stock issues or the disadvantage structure.
Totally. Yep.
Is like, what your coach is telling you, just address those 4 things, and that helps you. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll say good way number 3 to lose a debate is don't practice.
Yeah.
You've got to just get the muscle memory down, and I think that's another thing that you get. Really, really smart people tend to gravitate towards debate, right? Like I've met some of the smartest people I know.
That's up to be determined. We'll see.
Sure. Well, if nothing else, they sound smart. And I think like it's really interesting to see, especially when new people get into it that have like really great GPAs and their professors have really told them they should try out this debate thing. And then they just get completely demolished because they don't know some of the base rules or whatever. And their brain just explodes a little bit. And then seeing the difference between those debaters that like get it, they recognize, they take the defeat, like, okay, how do I get better? What feedback did I get? Like, how do I make the adjustments? How do I, work on it versus those that just staunchly disagree because their ego is hurt with it. So, just practice makes a big impact, but also like removing your own ego from it. And I think that's difficult to do with debate because unlike, any sport out there that is maybe a little bit less personal, debate feels really personal. These are your arguments. This is your brain that you're putting on the line. It's not like, have you practiced, shooting more, than the other person, or have you,
No, it's exactly like that. I mean, that's kind of what
it's a lot more personal. So I think it's difficult for some people to divorce their ego from it and just take the feedback as a way for them to improve rather than a criticism of their own logic and reasoning and mental capacity. So I think separating yourself from it is another really, really critical thing, especially for new debaters to pick up and roll with.
I think that Gordon Ramsay here says that paradigm. I think that's a good segue into knowing your judge better.
Absolutely,
and better.
Yeah, knowing your audience.
Yeah, and like that's basically what you're talking about. Is that I did when I first started judging. I'm like paradigms. Like writing mine, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what I'm going to say, the same thing as everyone else. But the more that I do it, the more I realize that where the differences are. I think it's important for judges to really be clear about their differences, because I don't come from this sort of tabula rasa blank slate perspective. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like I come from this perspective that the debate I'm evaluating, I'm thinking, okay, if a large audience was listening to this debate, who do I think would win? I kind of have to find the meeting place between, like that, average audience member and someone who's, somewhat trained in it. So it was like this sort of really messy equation for how to, decide which arguments are winning when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
There's an art in just kind of deciphering between taking everyone's word as a grain of salt, whether it be a coach or a judge, and taking their feedback with a grain of salt, meaning, hey, like I'm going to do my thing and it doesn't really matter what they say. But there's also and you weigh that against using it as constructive criticism. And so, experience and having a lot of people tell you over and over again what they think based on what more collective data tells you, maybe those are the best, quantifiable quality, ways to steer how you should change your styles based on what most people are telling you. And hopefully there's some consistencies because we're all fortunate when we hear like, hey, you need to stop clicking your pen. Something that is obvious or easy is like, just stop clicking your pen. Everyone doesn't like it. Your coach doesn't like it. The judge doesn't like it. There are things that are a little more gray. I want to talk quickly just because I kind of wanted to talk about like how not to lose debates a little bit too, right? Like not so much afterwards. Tim, you're right. You should write everything down the judge says and take it all with a grain of salt. But you should also look critically.
Let's quick segue real quick here. We got
Go ahead.
About are there some critique debates that feel unbeatable? Like I understand what you're saying, Aaron. I understand. Like
every critique feels unbeatable for about 5 seconds for sure.
Well, no, because we were talking about how personal things get, right? And this seems to be very much intertwined with identity and how people, you know, and they're trying to express themselves. I haven't come across a unbeatable critique, you know, to be honest with you. So like having that as an example would be, but I understand why they feel unbeatable is because they don't conform to the sort of standard stock issues thing. Like, how do you know who should win the ballot at the end? And I think, and I don't know, I wouldn't be afraid of that because my whole, like, the way that you should look at debates is during this period of time, what did we disagree on and who did a better job? That's how I see the, you know what I mean? Like, what did we disagree on and who did a better job, right? It's like, not who is right, not who is, you know, more tied in with the truth. What did we disagree on and who did a better job? And in that sense, I don't think there are such things as unbeatable critiques.
One thing, you know, one good way to lose debates is showing your cards on your face. We've talked about this on this program before, where it's like, you know, let's say you get up there and you run your AF and you're really proud of your AF and someone hits you with a hard critique that's like what you just said, like you think it's unbeatable at first, right? The first way to lose a debate is to just appear completely deflated and defeated. Like,
oh, yeah, nonverbals.
What am I gonna do? Like your physical control of your body in that moment is very important. So, you know, the appearance that you are not startled gives you more time to think of something. Okay, as far as how to answer critiques, I mean, obviously, you don't need to disagree with a critique. You don't need to say, for instance, that a critique that they're trying to apply isn't true or something like that. One strategy I would recommend, I mean, just try to focus on whatever solvency you have and just, you know, acknowledge their critique as best you can, but try to stick to the plan that you have and how you are solving some problem. And like that often, I mean, you're feeling confident, you're appearing in control, and you telling a judge that this is still an important problem and we're still solving a problem. And like, despite the fact that the critique is happening, this is still solving a problem. We can acknowledge their critique in a different debate to solve that problem. Like those types of arguments can be persuasive, but the key is to not look defeated and get confused or lost or like the appearance that everything I see,
right? I think that's what you're getting at, Matt, is you don't need to get super wrapped up in it. You can still win any debate, full stop.
Yep.
There is no such thing as an unbeatable argument.
Yep.
Full stop. Keep on with what your arguments are. And there's lots of, you know, coaches can give you lots of good common answers to critiques and ways to come back at it in different, you know, we meets or ways that you can, you know, alternative roll the ballot or coming up with different ways that you can pivot it around and engage in different ways with it. But at the end of the day, there is no such thing as an unbeatable argument. Yeah. However, you have some judges that are more open to it than others. So I think just like what Jared was talking about before, knowing your judging paradigms, right? Like when you get postings, looking up who your judge is and knowing how they feel about it, they'll most likely have in their written paradigm how they feel about certain critical arguments and or how they feel about certain positions and what they expect coming out of them. Speak to that judge. Like the more that you can tailor your arguments, the better you will do, because that's, you know, persuasion 101. Even outside of all the world of little technical debate land, to persuade another person, the first step is just audience adaptation and knowing what it is that is persuasive to them.
Appearing in control, appearing, you know, competent.
But also like what I was talking about before is like not necessarily any one argument. So if I was going to say that a debate is made up of many arguments, and there are some arguments that are worth more of your time to respond to than others, right? Literally, somebody's going to talk for 5 to 8 minutes, and your job is to document all of their arguments, and then you look at all of their arguments and you say, I got to disagree with something. Which one am I going to do? And then it's like you should have a choice of like, you know, 12 to 16 or something like that of arguments on your list. And you're like, I'm going to respond to that one.
Yeah.
Now you have to ask yourself, is it a critical argument? And if it is, then you're in good shape. If it's not, then you have to find something else that's a little bit more critical. You know what I mean? And so that's the same thing with critiques. Don't start reinventing the wheel. Document all of the arguments that they make.
Yeah.
look at them, evaluate which one you can respond to. If they try to weasel out of debating, you're like, dude, I'm trying to debate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really
exactly like get back to you wrote down a bunch of stuff. Like you have some solvency, you have some, that's exactly right, Gordon Ramsay, fake it till you make it. Well, another thing, I mean, just because we were talking about, Tim was bringing up, like, when the round is over, let's say you lost and you think the critique was unbeatable. The round isn't over, even though it's over. Go home, get an answer to that. Think of it. I mean, you now have time.
You're going to see that critique again.
You're going to see it again. So what felt unbeatable the first time, you have to figure something out. You will figure something out. You have to figure something out.
Sure. That's one of the reasons why I like policy and NFALD is because, like, when you have a single topic, I guess from like a data standpoint, because it's the same topic, and you're like, all right, let's try this case.
It shapes and polishes through the year.
You're like, how many times did it win? I had 3 affirmatives. We won 2 out of 3. We won all 3. It's like, oh, our affirmative is doing just fine. Let's work on our negative. You know what I mean? Like, yep. I love the thought of fine tuning it that way. I don't have many opportunities to do that. It's more limited prep stuff, and so, but I do really appreciate that, because even when you lose, you're like, well, it lost for this one, but not for that one. So we're doing something right. What can we do to tweak it?
There's a subject that I think is important when looking at critical positions, and this is more for coaches in preparing your students than just for students, but it really goes both ways. And it was a colleague of mine, another coach, that pointed out it's a really dangerous thing. And maybe we talk about this as a whole another 30 minutes sometime, but it's a dangerous thing to send your student in with a position that they cannot afford to lose. I've seen some critiques sometimes that are so specifically personal to the debater that it is like their identity is what's on trial in the round because they make that so closely intertwined. And that is not a fair position to put your student in, because even if they're the best debater in the world, if they lose on a position for whatever reason that is like, I personally have so much invested and so much on the line here that if anyone else wins, that's saying that, like, I am less valuable. That's not what debate is for. That's, I think, a dangerous thing to set up to have a coach, put their students out there. And I have seen those critiques before, and I've voted on them. And there were lots of tears in the rounds, and it was messy, and there was contests and all kinds of issues there that I think I'm really glad my colleague pointed out. As a coach, it is our responsibility to send our students in, remembering that we are never debating the person. You are debating the arguments. You are 2 people or 2 teams in that round discussing a topic, and it's not ever the ad hominem against each other. Remember, it's still about the subject. So be careful with the arguments that prepare your students going in, and students, be careful with how much you tie your identity into your arguments, not running things you can't afford to lose.
So, what Cecilia was asking, what if you end up agreeing with the debate? I can't look at debate as one speech equals one idea. That's not how it works, right? It's like the whole point is that if you're speaking for 5 minutes or more, that means that you are saying many things. You have to, right? Like, a single argument takes 30 seconds to make. And so you don't make a single argument in 5 minutes. You make, 8, 9, 10 arguments, and they all come together for a case. And so my point is that you have to see those individual parts, because I've never come across a situation where you agree with all 12 things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, I've never seen that.
I want to there's 2 things I want to say about this, Cecilia. If you are saying, what if you ideologically agree with the AF and you're on the neg? Okay. That aspect of debate will always, that comes up. And that's one of my favorite parts about debate, is because you're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to either learn to argue things you don't believe in, which in my opinion is a good thing to learn, because it really forces you to kind of get outside of what you're comfortable with. Or you need to get creative and come up with different solutions, as Tim's always talking about, creative solutions that not only are consistent with what you believe, but also are different from what this other person is arguing. So those things are possible. It's hard to think of in an instant, but it's easier if you have time and people around to help you kind of think through these things.
It's a muscle. You get better the more you practice at it.
Yeah.
And like it's evaluating your own positions on it, right?
Yeah.
Like what good is a belief if it's never been challenged? So you may believe really strongly on one thing, but now's your opportunity to really objectively see the other side. Sometimes, honestly, I liked debating against the topics with which I most, staunchly agreed, because I felt like it made me a more objective debater. I was able to look right, like I'm able to look at all of the the pieces on the table if it's a board of chess and see what can be done rather than having like such an emotional investment in it. I think that is really an important skill that debate cultivates in participants.
Critical thinking. We're talking about critical thinking.
Absolutely.
And it has to do with your ability to participate in debates on both sides, no matter what. And it also, critical thinking comes into play when you're having to reflect on yourself after you lose. And you have to look at yourself and be, constructively, criticized by those around you and get better.
Was talking about perspective, about having get perspective, right? And so one way to get perspective is to actually judge debates, right?
Yeah. Everyone's the best once they're the judge, by the way.
Right. but also you get experience like saying somebody lost. And so that perspective is really important as well. Like when you try to explain yourself to the person you voted against, now you say like, oh, I've been there. I've been on the other end of this where someone was trying to explain themselves. And so that really helps to kind of, that perspective really
The possibility of losing is really what makes this activity really exciting, unfortunately. So just know that keep debating. You know what I mean? That's the last thing I'll say. I realize we're out of time, but like, if you're like me, it's like the reason why you go on a roller coaster is because it's a little bit scary. You know what I mean? This activity, you put yourself out there and it's kind of scary, but I enjoy it. And hopefully you come to really enjoy that rush that you can get from possibly losing and possibly winning. But we all enjoy the game. And so just, keep at it, everybody. I do believe it's good for you and it's good for character.
Yeah, it's a good way to end it. All right. We got Tim Seavey, Visolution, San Diego State. We got Matt Shapiro, Esquire, Jared Kubika Miller, your professor, debate coach, everybody. All right. We will see you next week.
Happy Veterans Day, everybody.
Happy Veterans Day.